I'll just ask somebody to confirm. Hopefully you're just seeing a slide.
Yes, we see it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much. Well, hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you all today. I'm really excited about spending the next hour with you. I'm Linda Hofschire, and like Joyce said, I direct the Research Institute for Public Libraries, or RIPL. And so we provide training both online and in person about just using data to better serve your community. And so I'm excited that there's a critical mass of all of you who are interested in this topic. And I also want to start by saying that if you're coming into this kind of thinking like, oh, like maybe I'm not super into numbers or not just totally bought into this, that's okay. I think that data can be a tool for every library person to use, no matter what your previous experience or expertise with it, but it's just another tool to have in your toolkit, again, to make your services even better for your communities. So I'm excited to talk about that this morning. So I want to start, and I apologize, I'm going to be looking to the side a lot because I have multiple screens going, so bear with me. But I'm curious to know who is in the room with us. And so if you would be willing to share, and you can either put this in chat or you're welcome also to come onto audio and just share your name and organization and city. And then also, like, what is something you're looking forward to reading, watching, or listening to this summer? And so while you're doing that, I'll just say that I'm located in Denver, Colorado. And I have been to Vermont once and loved it. I got to come for the Association of Rural and Small Libraries conference when it was in Burlington back in 2019, I think, but I hope to come back another time soon. So that's, but I'm in Denver, and something I'm looking forward to watching this summer is the show Hacks. I don't know if any of you have seen that on HBO, but the new season dropped pretty recently, so I'm excited for that. But again, feel free to share either in chat or you're welcome to come on audio as well. And so I'm just watching the chat.
I might have been that neighbor in my early
Great. Thanks, Paige. Oh, the new Deadpool movie. Yeah, that's great. And again, if anyone wants to share in chat, share in audio, feel free to unmute. But we'll just wait a minute. Oh, great. Library volunteer from Burlington. Thanks, Glenn. Masterpiece Mystery returns. Thanks, Lisa. That's, yeah, the Michael Pollan's book, This Is Your Mind on Plants. Great. Welcome, Cedar. The Orchardist in the Highest Tide. I love that. So Cedar's reading a book in preparation for a trip to Washington State. I love doing that to prepare if you're going to go to a different place. Oh, awesome, Jillian, going to drive in with your children. That's so fun. And Erica, the new Stephen King book. Oh, and Mel, Eve, the Dark Tower. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. It's always nice to know who's here, as well as to get some new recommendations, media recommendations. I'm always looking for something new. So feel free to keep adding to the chat, but I'm just going to move us forward. And so here's our plan for today. So we want to talk about outcome-based evaluation. And if you're new to that, that's great. If you already have some experience with that, that's great too. And hopefully this might just add to your awareness of it. But this is an important topic because it can be so beneficial both to your library and to your community. And so we're going to talk about kind of the basic steps for conducting outcome-based evaluation, and then also kind of put that into the context of why do we care about this? Like, why is this worth taking the time to do? How does it benefit us? So, and the tool that we're going to be talking about a lot today that you use to do outcome-based evaluation is called a logic model. So we'll be spending some time talking about how you build those. We're also going to talk about a variety of ways that you can measure outcomes. And so some of those will be things that you can do really quick if you've only got like a minute, because I know that we all have so many responsibilities. Some of them are, might be things that you could do if you had a little bit more time, but we'll talk about a variety of methods and tools that you can use to measure outcomes. And then kind of, like I said earlier up here in the slide, kind of why does this benefit us? We'll see how outcome-based evaluation can be used to improve your programs and services, as well as for demonstrating your impact or advocacy purposes. So that's where we're headed. So I'm going to ask you all to a Padlet board, and I'm going to push out a link for that in just a second. But what I would like you to add to this board is think about one public-facing program or service, so something that you offer to the public that's central to your library. So something, maybe it's been something that you've offered a long time, but that's really kind of part of your core mission or core services. Or maybe it's something that's newer, but is part of like a strategic plan initiative, but again, something that's a pretty high priority to your library. So I want you to think about that. And then I want you to think about one of your library's goals for this program or service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push out this link into chat. And so if you go to that link, that's going to bring you to a Padlet board. And if you're new to Padlet, this is a pretty user-friendly tool. And so you can see I have an example already on that board. So I'm asking you to share, number one, just what is this public-facing program or service that's central to your library? And so in my example, you can see that I put preschool story time. And then number two, just share one of your library's goals for this program or this service. And in my example, you can see that I put that caregivers learn about the importance of early literacy practices, sing, talk, read, write, play. So we'll take a minute to have you go ahead and add to that Padlet board your own responses. And you can do that just by clicking on the plus button at the bottom of your screen. That will give you a little note that you can add your own responses. So any questions about what we're doing, feel free to, if you have any questions, share those in chat or audio. But otherwise, I want you to go ahead and add to that Padlet board, again, one program or service that's central to your library, and then one of your library's goals for this program or service. Great, so thanks. We've got one addition: after school programs and children feeling a sense of belonging in the library. And we'll just wait another couple minutes while everybody continues to add their own program or service. And thanks, someone added book club kits. Participants create a community of reading and learning. So that's one of the library's goals. Great. Another after school programs, great. have a program every day of the week to make sure that there is always a safe third space for school-aged children. Great, thank you for adding that. I love all of our children's programs from story time to our crazy kids parties. Sounds fun. Yeah, you do anything you can to get the younger kids to come to the library so that they can see how fun we are and will want to keep coming. Awesome. Sing and dance with Robin. Awesome. Musical experience for toddlers and preschoolers designed to support healthy cognitive, physical, and social development. Great. And then another contribution we've got is Queer Joy Club, creating a community space for an underrepresented group to engage with each other and library resources. Awesome. So if you're still working, that's great. Please keep adding to this. And we're going to come back. We're going to come back to this at the end. So, but if you haven't added anything yet, I do encourage you to just quick add something, because again, we're going to come back to it at the end of today's session. All right. Okay, so now I want to jump into logic models. And so to conduct outcome-based evaluation, we want to use a logic model. And so before I jump into what that is, I have a question for you all. And we were originally going to do this as a poll, but we were having some problems with the poll feature this morning. So instead, we're going to do it in chat. So bear with me a second while I pop this into chat. And I'll go ahead and put the question on the screen so you can see what it is. But I'll put it in chat as well. Okay, so the question is, which of the following statements describe your previous experience with logic models? Select all that apply. So since we can't do this as a poll, I'm just going to ask, if you're willing, if you could just share the numbers that you choose in chat. So you can just go ahead, read the options, and you can choose more than one if it's applicable to you. But I definitely appreciate if you'd be willing just to share your number or numbers in chat. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. This is really helpful just to know kind of what your previous experience has been, if you have any previous experience. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so it looks like kind of we're in the 1 and 2 areas here. We're new, perhaps, or have a basic understanding, but haven't created one. So what is a logic model? It's basically just a graphical depiction, or like a visual depiction, of how your program or service is supposed to work and what it's trying to accomplish. It can also be thought of as a roadmap. So it's really helping to get you to think systematically about how your program or service works, what it's leading to. Or it sometimes it also a term that's used for it is like a theory of change. So when we use that term, it's thinking about the idea of with our program or service, what change do we hope to see in the people who are participating in the program or using the service? So this is what a logic model can do for us. And so it really helps us to answer the questions, where are we? And by that, I mean like the program or service participants, where are we going? How will we get there? And then what will show that we've arrived? And so if we can create a logic model for our public facing programs or services, that really helps us to show a clear path to getting our participants to that place we want them to get. Like in the examples that you all had just shared in the Padlet, that someone had said like they're fun kids parties just to get the kids that come in knowing what the library offers and this is a great place to be. That's where you want them to arrive, that they think the library is fun, is a great place to be. So the logic model helps us to think systematically about this whole process so that it really can optimize our chances for getting our participants to where we want them to go. So let me show you what a logic model looks like. And this is just a basic diagram. These can become really complex, but we're gonna stick with this diagram this morning. And so you can see there's 4 components: inputs, activities, outputs, and then outcomes. And so let's start with inputs. And so inputs are the resources that we need to invest in order to deliver the program or service. So what are we investing? Those are inputs. And so let's think about this like in a summer learning context. I know that's probably quite relevant to everybody right now, given the time of year we're in. So when we think about some of the resources that our libraries need to invest in order to provide summer learning, certainly money. Money is a big part of most programs and services we provide. So that would be an input. And then staff. So how many staff are working on summer learning? And then also how much time are they spending on it? So those are all some examples of inputs. What are the resources we're putting in terms of money, in terms of staff and time in order to provide summer learning? So as we walk through each step of the logic model, I want to have us work on building a logic model. So I just showed you an example of inputs with summer learning, but what I'd like to do is give you a different program, and then I'm going to have you think about some inputs for this new program. So here's our program. It's a new and innovative program that we're going to offer called Borrow a Buddy, and this is pretty much what you would think it sounds like. So this is going to be pet checkout. And I know that you're probably immediately thinking, these are the 1,000 reasons why this would never work. Great. You can suspend your disbelief for this hour, and we're just using this example just to have some fun. So in this program, Borrow a Buddy, people can check out pets, and you can see there's kind of a variety of pets that they can check out, from cats to iguanas, rabbits, etc. There's a 3-week circulation period that they can bring them home, and all the supplies and the food are provided by the library. And so what this library, who's offering Borrow a Buddy, is hoping will occur for the people who participate in this service is that people will improve their sense of well-being and connectedness, and also that they will become more confident caring for a pet. So in a nutshell, this is our program that we're going to play with this morning. So check out a pet, 3 weeks, you've got all the supplies and food. And again, the library is hoping that this will increase a sense of well-being and confidence among the participants. So what I'd like you to do now, your turn, is think about, for Borrow a Buddy, what are some inputs that you would suggest would go into running this program? And so I'm going to give a link in chat. This is to another Padlet board. And so we're going to start building a logic model. And so I'll invite you all to go to that Padlet board. And you'll see on the left side, there's a column for inputs. And if you click on the plus button, you can add just any of your suggestions for inputs. And again, as a reminder, these are the resources that we would need in order to offer Borrow a Buddy. So what would you suggest would be some inputs for this program or this service? think about that and go ahead and add that to the Padlet. And I just went back to that little description slide in case that helps you to brainstorm. Great. So food, absolutely. So we would need to purchase and acquire food. Oh, great. And so, and I see someone put care instructions for the animal, and we're actually going to get to that in our activities column, but I like the way you're thinking. So it's like, yeah, that is all about staff time to do a lot of different things. So we're going to need to invest a lot of staff time. That is an input to do a variety of things. Great. The animals themselves, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to need to acquire these animals that we're going to be circulating. Awesome. Someone put space. That is absolutely an input. The library is providing space as a resource. Great. Thanks. These are all great suggestions. So those are all examples of inputs. And again, an input, it's just the resources that we're putting in. And I'm going to share a few examples too of what I have for inputs, and you can see that all of this pretty much is covered by what you all added. But so my suggestions for inputs could be the money for all of this: animal care, supplies and equipment, staff time for developing and running this initiative, space, as several of you mentioned, for pets to be housed when not circulating. But so here for the inputs, we're thinking about the resources that are going in. Obviously, there would be a lot more than this if we wanted to get really detailed, but this just gives you kind of an idea of how to get going. So then we come to activities. So now we're thinking about, okay, we've got these resources, the money, the staff time, the space. What are we going to be doing with them to try to bring about our intended outcomes? And so going back to our summer learning example a minute. So here's some examples of what activities might be. Perhaps staff are creating and then offering a variety of programs that are all around the summer learning theme. So that's an example of an activity, the staff working on those. Perhaps staff is doing readers advisory specifically around the summer reading theme. That's another example of an activity that would kind of most likely be ongoing throughout the summer. Maybe staff has decided this year that they're going to be using time tracking software. So an activity would be selecting that software, getting it up and running, maintaining it. That's another example then of an activity that would be involved in making summer learning happen. So those are all activities. So let's go back to our Padlet board, and I see some of you are already there. That's awesome. I'll pop the link in chat again. And now let's work on that activity column. Great. And so think about what are we doing with those resources, the money, our staff, the space, in order to make this program happen. Great. So people are suggesting things like, yeah, having some type of seminars or training for patrons on how to handle these pets that they're going to be checking out. Promotion, yep, absolutely. Oh, and that's interesting. Measure the comfort level of caring for the pets. And let's put a pin in that, because I think that absolutely could be an activity. And I think that could play in later on too, as we move forward through the logic model. Great. So thank you. Those are all examples of the activities that we might engage in for running this program. And I'll just again show you some examples of other activities. And again, these overlap a lot what people have already said, but we would need to acquire everything, the pets, the supplies, the equipment. We perhaps would need to create some care instructions for the different animals that the participants could take home with them. And of course, there'd be all the ongoing tasks like checkouts and returns, maintaining the supplies, taking care of the pets. So those are all, some examples of activities that we might engage in. Okay, so now we're getting to outputs. So once we've invested our resources, engaged in these activities in order to get the program up and running, now we're looking at what comes out as a result of those activities. So that often comes down to like participation or use of materials like circulation. So how many were provided and used? How many people did we reach? Who did we reach? So in summer learning, again, we might think about this in terms of how many programs did we offer for summer learning or special events? How many people attended those programs? I'd mentioned that we, might be acquiring the software for time tracking. So then an output of that would be how many minutes did people spend reading? So now we're going to go back once again to our Borrow a Buddy logic model. And I'll have you think about what do you see as outputs potentially for Borrow a Buddy. And so again, this is kind of thinking about those counts that come out as a result of our activities, participants, checkouts, things like that. And so we're going back to the same logic model link. And I'll invite you to share on that Padlet what some examples of outputs might be. Great, yeah. Number of pets. So yeah, basically circulation for the pets. That's a biggie. What else? Great. And so I like some of these examples I see you're kind of getting into more granular issues of like who is checking out the pets. If there are some preferred pets, that would be very useful information to have. Great. All right. And I'll just show you the examples I've got. So number of checkouts, for sure. Another example might be like basically reference questions. Keeping track of how many participant questions are we getting for this service. So those are a couple other examples of outputs. And now we get to kind of the final step in the logic model, which is outcomes. So here, this gets to the goal of this service. So what are the changes that we're seeing in the people after they experience the program or service? And so those changes might look like behavioral or new knowledge gained, attitudes or skills. And so going back to summer learning one more time, some examples of outcomes for summer learning might be that the kids' enjoyment of reading increased after participating in summer learning. Perhaps we avoided summer slide. Kids maintained or improved their reading skills. Or another example of an outcome might be that when kids were presented with a few different options for what to do, they were more likely to choose reading. Those are all examples of outcomes. And so again, we're looking at what are the changes we're seeing in participants afterwards. Those might be knowledge, behavior, attitude, skill, etc. So let's go back to the Padlet board one more time. And I'd like you to think about what outcomes might look like for this program, for Borrow a Buddy. What do you see as some changes that might occur in the participants. Great. And so someone said interest in having their own pet. Yeah, that absolutely could be an outcome. Skills and comfort in animal care increase. Great. What else? What other changes might we expect to see? I love that, lower blood pressure. Knowledge of how to best care for a pet. Great. Yeah. Yeah, those are all great examples of some potential outcomes. Okay. Yeah. Regular visits to the library or attendance at library programs. Yeah. And so, and with those the visits and attendance, those those are some things that we can count. Those are outputs. So like how many people visited, or how did that change with this new program, or how many people were attending programs. But maybe the outcome of that is that they're like more connected to the library, or more excited about coming and being a part of different services and programs. So that's great. Okay. And so in my example, and with this hypothetical library that I'm working with that's doing Borrow a Buddy, the outcomes the library was really focused on was increased confidence in caring for a pet, which I know is kind of mentioned in our Padlet board as well as like an increased sense of well-being. So, but yeah, so those are all great examples that you shared, I love, on the Padlet board for potential outcomes. So that's a logic model in a nutshell. Now, I want to mention, so how to create a logic model. As we just experienced, we started with inputs and then worked our way through the logic model. But actually, if you are going to go now and create a logic model for one of your library's programs or services, the best way to do it is to start at the end, because it's kind of that idea of beginning with the end in mind. So we have these goals that we've set out, that we are hoping that when people participate in our programs or services, that they will gain something, that they will that there will be some change in them. So it's really useful when you're creating your own logic model to start by articulating those. So okay, maybe we're creating a logic model for a program we've offered for a long time, maybe story time. But let's start at the end. Think about, what are the outcomes we're hoping to see for story time? Articulate those and then work backwards from there, so that you're beginning with the end in mind. This is where we want to reach. Then that really helps you to create kind of those inputs and activities that are tailored towards working towards those goals. And so this is the beauty of a logic model, is that it gets you to really focus in on what is the end that we're trying to reach, and then backing up. Are we offering, or can we, create the conditions that will maximize the chance that these outcomes will occur? So in saying that, a logic model can really serve as a great guide just for planning a program, in addition to evaluating it. And so let's say that your library is going to be launching a new program or service. Planning it out using the logic model will really help you to think systematically about, are we developing this in a way that is likely to lead to these outcomes that we've articulated for it? So I really encourage you, if you're launching a new program or service, develop it using the logic model. And if you're creating a logic model for a program that's already in place, that's great too. It's never too late. But as you create this logic model, it can kind of help you check your logic. So we're going to see an example of this a little bit later on. But let's say that we are creating it for a long-standing program like Storytime. And so we articulate our outcomes. Here's the changes we want to see in our participants. Well, let's then look back at like the resources we're putting in and the activities that we're currently engaging in. Does it make sense that what we're doing in those would actually lead to those outcomes? So it really helps you to check your logic. But like I said, we'll see a more concrete example of that in a little bit. But that is a logic model. I'm just going to check because I've been away from chat for a bit. Okay, I just wanted to check to make sure that I wasn't missing any questions. But please feel free to add questions at any time if you've got them. Okay. So we've established what a logic model is. Now let's think a little bit about, okay, how do we measure outcomes? Because obviously, and actually let me go back a minute to the diagram, these other components of the logic model, inputs, activities, outputs, those are things we can all figure out internally in our libraries. We don't need to gather that information from patrons. Those are all things that we are tracking or just know obviously what activities we're engaging in. But the outcomes, how do we figure out if those outcomes are occurring? So I want to talk a little bit about some ideas for measuring outcomes, getting that information from your participants to find out if they are experiencing these changes that you're hoping that they will after being in a program. So the most common ways in library that we measure outcomes are through these methods, including like interviews with people, focus groups, or surveys. And I'm not really going to talk about interviews and focus groups today. That's a big topic, but just to briefly mention, so in an interview, we're talking about a conversation between two people, so the interviewer and the interviewee. Focus group would be a small group of people with a facilitator, maybe about 6 to 8 people. But the beauty of interviews and focus groups is it's a bit more of a free-flowing conversation where you would have established some questions to ask, but you can follow up and probe people's answers and just get it allows you to do a deeper dive into how people are experiencing your programs. I'm going to share some resources at the end of the webinar in case you want to learn more about conducting interviews and focus groups. But what I want to focus more on today is surveys, and that is because this is just in terms of like the time we have available to us, the resources we have available, this is just usually far more doable in libraries. And so, when we think about surveys, certainly we can think about what we all, the traditional version of a survey. Here's just an example of like a summer reading program outcomes question. So we're asking caregivers if their kids' enjoyment of reading, reading skills, and reading by choice increased, stayed the same, or decreased after participating in summer reading. So that's just a, kind of a standard maybe survey question of how we would assess outcomes. If you are using surveys to learn about what people gain from a program, definitely encourage you to include at least one open-ended question. So that means not where there's like those response choices like we just saw, increased, stayed the same, decreased, but where people can just write in a response. And so I'm just going to show you a couple examples from a survey that I had administered asking about people's experience with public computer centers in a library. And so one response, you can see this person said, this is probably the most valuable resource dollar for dollar available to community. I've found jobs, located tax information, and have done schoolwork over the years. Thank you. So that's just such a rich response in terms of seeing how did someone benefit from using this computer center. And this is also having these types of responses are great things to show like for marketing or fundraising, grant application purposes. Another example of a response that we got to this survey is the access to the internet afforded by the public library is most probably the only reason I am not completely bereft of any and all computer skills. Were it not for this access, as well as the assistance rendered via classes offered, I would most likely be unemployed, if not unemployable. So again, you can really see the power of using an open-ended question if you have a survey that you're giving out, just to collect these powerful stories. So if you're interested in using surveys, but maybe don't want to start from scratch, have to create your own, I wanted to mention a tool from the Public Library Association that's called Project Outcome. And if anyone has used this, let me know in chat. I'm curious to know if you're familiar with this or have ever used Project Outcome. But it is free to public libraries, and they have a set of very simple surveys on 8 different common program topics in libraries. And you can see I've just listed them here on screen. And so you can go in to the PLA's Project Outcome tool, again for free, and administer any of these surveys. They have both online tools for doing that, or you can print them out and administer them on paper. And then PLA also has tools to analyze the data and to visualize it. So this is a nice way to get started surveying about outcomes if, again, you don't want to start from scratch and have to do all the work on your own. So those are kind of traditional surveys, but I also want to talk about some more non-traditional ways of surveying people, and some ways also that can be really quick, just to, if you've got 1 minute of a person's time, just to get a little bit of feedback from them. So one idea is to use like a continuum. And so at our in-person RIPL events, we put up, this is, it's maybe hard to see on screen, but this is a huge banner that we have right by our registration or check-in desk at the beginning of these 3-day events that we offer. And we give everyone these little dot stickers, and then we just have them rate themselves on their confidence and knowledge of our topics. And then at the very end of the 3-day event, we give them a new dot sticker or dot stickers in different colors, and then they can rate themselves again. And this is quick, it's more fun for people to do. And you can just see visually that without needing to know math, the shift in people's confidence and skills. And I see a question. Yes, I will be sharing the slides at the end, so you'll have this as a resource. Another way that you can just quick, get feedback from people is, you may have seen the tip jars. These are kind of popular now in coffee shops and things like this. Here, I was at a coffee shop where they were having you vote for your favorite Star Wars character with your tip. But you can apply that in your library. And so here's an example. This was at a library conference where people were voting for Dewey or no Dewey, and you can see it was pretty neck and neck. But with just something tactile and fun, those little colorful pom-poms. And then on the right side of the screen, here's an example of maybe you just have a question posted up after a program, or just hanging somewhere in a popular place in your library that people can quick answer with a dot or with a sticker. And so again, that doesn't require a lot of time for the people that you're asking for feedback from, and it's more fun for them, but it gets you a little bit of information. Another example is Post-it note feedback. So if you want maybe a little bit more information than the dot sticker, and maybe the people you're asking for feedback from have a few more minutes, you could just invite them to respond to some questions quick on Post-it notes. And in this example that you can see here, this is actually in a museum, but this museum changes out the questions periodically too. So you can just change that out, but always have this place for people to be answering a question, giving some feedback, just quick on a Post-it note. iPad polls can be great, again, for just getting some quick feedback from folks. You can set up an iPad to basically work like a kiosk, just running maybe 1 or 2 questions that you can ask people maybe as they're leaving a program, to quick just hit a couple buttons on the screen. And again, you haven't taken up too much of their time, but it just gives you some information. And then the one other idea I'll share is a postcard. And so this can be useful if you're running a program where it would be nice to know later on how that program benefited them. And so one big example of this might be like resume building or job skills. So you could pass out self-addressed stamped postcards to participants and just say, hey, you know, if something happens down the line, if you get an interview or get a job, just write back and let us know. Obviously, this is not going to give you huge numbers, but it's going to give you some great anecdotes of how our programs can benefit people down the line. And it can often be really hard to collect that information, but this is one way to start. Okay, so those are some ideas for measuring outcomes. And I want to finish up then today, our time has gone so fast, by just talking about, again, why is outcome-based evaluation, OBE, why is OBE valuable to libraries and to our communities? And so I want to give a couple examples of why it's valuable, one about program improvement, and then a second about demonstrating impact. So starting with program improvement. So if we measure outcomes, let's say for Borrow a Buddy, we administered a survey to people who had checked out pets. And we're interested in learning about, hey, did they hit those outcomes that we were trying to achieve? Did they increase their confidence caring for a pet? Did they gain higher levels of well-being? So we do our survey, we look at our results. Okay, let's say that for that increased confidence outcome, actually it turned out that very few people reported increased confidence. And in fact, staff who were working on this project said there were a lot of questions they got from people who checked out pets and were struggling to care for them. And a lot of the cats and dogs got returned early, whereas some of the other pets lasted the whole 3-week checkout period. So that's really helpful information to know as we're thinking about maybe do we need to make some tweaks to this service in order to help to maximize the chance that people will be increasing their confidence caring for a pet. And then in terms of that well-being outcome, hey, great, actually people did tend to report higher levels of well-being, and here we like kind of operationalize that as happiness and connection to the community after participating. So great, we know that we did do a good job in achieving that intended outcome. So now what we can do is go back to our logic model and take a look at, is there something wrong maybe with like the activities that we were engaging in that meant that we didn't quite get to that increased confidence caring for a pet. And so maybe, for example, in addition to having those care instructions that we created to give to our participants, there needs to be an orientation program. And I know some people suggested that in Padlet, that, yeah, we need to have some type of actual training for people. And perhaps that could equip them to be more, to be set up for success and then to feel more confident. Or maybe in looking at like the types of pets that we're offering, and we know that a lot of dogs and cats were returned early, do we need to provide more support around that? Or do we need to focus on other types of pets? But by measuring outcomes, that we can take those results and learn from them. Then we can go back, look through each part of our logic model and think about, oh, what might we need to tweak in here in order to increase the likelihood that people will experience those outcomes that we were aiming for. My other example of why outcome-based evaluation can really benefit our libraries and communities is that it gives you a great tool for demonstrating impact. And so this comes in super handy, whether it's for marketing, fundraising, grant writing, any types of advocacy purposes. And so I'm just going to show you a couple examples, and I will provide the links to where these came from so you can take a closer look at them. But of how other organizations have used outcome-based evaluation results. And so what we're looking at right now, these are snippets from a report actually of study of public libraries in Scotland. And you're seeing examples of how the library benefits participants in terms of their mental health and well-being. And so these are great anecdotes to share, as well as some numbers. You can see those survey results, like 88% said the program increased opportunities for social contact. This just gives you some data to be able to share when you're trying to advocate for your library. Here's another couple of examples. These are snippets from some infographics. One is about check out Colorado State Parks. This is a program we have in Colorado where all of our public libraries have free state park passes that they circulate. And I know that it's hard to see on the screen, but I'll share this, like I said, I'll share these with you afterwards. But this infographic mixes some quotes that came from open-ended questions from participants in the surveys about how the state parks pass benefited them, as well as some of those numbers, those survey results. And similarly, the infographic on the other side of the screen shares some examples of how a program called Read to the Children, which was to connect children with caregivers who are incarcerated, really helped to strengthen their bonds with those caregivers. So this is just a few simple examples of how outcome-based evaluation can really be such a benefit to your libraries and communities. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. You know, some of those examples I showed for gathering feedback can be as quick as having people pop up a sticker or write a quick note on a Post-it. So I know we're almost at our end. So I want to ask if you have any questions. I don't think I missed anything in chat, but I'm just going back to take another look. And so feel free if something has popped up. The other thing I want to remind you of is where we started this morning. And so I'm popping that link in chat again. And that was the Padlet where you identified a program or service that's really central to your library, and then your goals for it. And so I think we're not going to have much time to do this in our remaining minutes together, but what I would encourage you to do at some point after today is go back to this and think about, kind of after going through our webinar this morning, how are you thinking now about the goal that you articulated? Do you want to tweak it at all? Or maybe not, maybe it's great the way it is. And then maybe think about starting to build out a logic model for this program or service. So you've already identified, by articulating your goal, an outcome. That's great. So maybe you want to identify a few more outcomes, but then you can start working backwards to create a whole logic model for your program. So this just kind of gives you a jump start. All right. Yeah, and Lorraine, thank you for that feedback. I'm not a math person, that this gives you confidence. Absolutely. I think if you take nothing else away, you don't need to be a math person in order to benefit from data and to use data. So there are many simple things that you can do that can be so useful. So that's great. Um, as we're as we're quickly ending here, I wanted to pop a couple other links in chat. And I will also share these out afterwards. But if you're interested in learning more about the topics we discussed today, we're currently running a webinar series through RIPL called 12 Months to Better Library Data. And sorry, I just grabbed the wrong link. Let me try that again. And it is free. It's monthly for 12 months. You can do the recordings if for anything that you've missed, so that you don't have to be there live. And so that's the second link that I just popped in chat, and definitely encourage you to check those out, register, watch the recordings. The other link I popped in chat, it's these library evaluation 101 videos. They get more into the nitty gritty of, oh, maybe I do want to do an interview. How do I do that? How do I build a survey if I want to start from scratch? How do I run a focus group? So if you have any interest in those things, those videos will help you just to learn a little bit more about the how-tos of doing those. So I wanted to share those. And then the other final thing is that I do have all of the resources that I talked about today and the slides. You can find them at this link. And so be sure to check those out, and that can just serve as a reference afterwards. So thank you so much for spending an hour